Well, let's hear it. You hear that bell that will indicate it's 4 o'clock on Broad and Wall in New York, Wall Street, New York Stock Exchange closing right there. We are open for business in politics and the news. Markets look a little mixed. Very quiet trading day today, folks. Up 34 right now before the last couple of settlement seconds. It's been moving around a little bit. NASDAQ down a little bit more, 98. VIX up a little bit, a little nervousness. Gold backed off, still almost $3,400. Oil, again, really, really sticking in this upper, mid to upper $70 area. We've been talking crypto every single day. Bitcoin this morning had jumped up to 107,000, 104,000 yesterday, up to 107, now back down to 103.3. So Bitcoin's backing off a little bit. Gold's still hanging around the $3,400 an ounce. Everyone was waiting to see what's going on with Jerome Powell and interest rates. I will tell you very quickly some of the bigger stocks that people hold. I'm an owner of Apple stock, just telling you right now. Apple, 200 up $4, bucked the trend a little bit. Tesla, almost unchanged. Tesla, $322 an ounce. And I mean, a share, sorry about that. So we'll see what's happening. We'll see what's happening. This person, I'm so thrilled to have my next guest on this show. I absolutely adore her. She is, let me tell you something. I'm going to go out and say this. She is one of the best investigative journalists this country has ever seen or known. She has her own podcast called Going Rogue with Lara Logan. Lara, really good to have you on the show, my friend. Congratulations with the pod. Welcome to the digital world. It's where all the cool kids are hanging out these days.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Iran, Israel, Trump, U.S. involvement. Where does Lara Logan stand on all this?
Well, first of all, it's really important to me that we are always conscious of what we don't know, right? Because in these situations, there's a lot that we don't know. Secondly, I think what we're dealing with here is a real vacuum in terms of messaging. And part of the problem is that so many people are disillusioned with government. They've lost faith in the institution of government. They've lost faith in their leaders. And people just don't know what to believe. And then you have some very kind of facile conversation that's about, okay, if I take this position on Ukraine, then you have to take this position on Israel and Iran without really looking at what's at stake and what the issues are. And so, for me, being conscious of what I don't know, what I would point to, some of the more important things are understanding the strategic relationship that Israel has with the United States of America. You can disagree on, how you think the United States should act, but for these people who say that it's a one-way street, Israel has an outsized influence. They have too many lobbyists. They run the banking. They run Hollywood. They're all evil. They're all bad. This rise of anti-Semitism that you see all across. And I'm not saying if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. I'm talking about, a post that I saw where someone posted a picture of Hitler and said, "Do we owe him an apology?" The kind of rhetoric that is maybe exploiting this situation and is rising in this situation, which is all of that ignores the fact that Israel has for a very long time provided the intelligence that the United States has relied upon to keep it safe. And that means in Hamas, Hezbollah, whether it's the Houthis in Yemen or whoever it happens to be, Israel has the ability to penetrate those operations to the point, at a level that the United States does not possess. Also, if you look at it strategically, Iran, since the regime came to power in 1979, their stated goal has been the genocide of Israel and the eradication of Israel off the map. It has also been death to America. So in the current situation, Iran is backed and working with Venezuela, working with China, with the CCP, working with the Russians, working with the North Koreans. So you could, when you look at Iran strategically, the president doesn't have the luxury of saying, I like Iran, I don't like Iran. It's not about that. It's looking at who are the enemies of the United States, what is the level of the threat that they pose, how is that playing out, right, on the strategic plane, and what are our options to deal with it? Because you can't just look at Iran in isolation when all of the people, all of the countries who are in an undeclared war with the United States to some degree, less so the Russians than anybody else. I mean, Putin is Russia first, but he's also working against the globalist agenda, and the United States is working against the globalist agenda, so there's some overlap there. But when it comes to Venezuela, okay, look at the fact that Venezuela and Iran are like this. Look at the fact that when the southern border was open under Joe Biden, who came pouring across the southern border? Tren de Aragua, which was created by the leadership of Venezuela, out of the criminals, the most hardened criminals in their prisons. And who do they work alongside? Well, the IRGC, who has also infiltrated units across the southern border, according to multiple intelligence operations that I have been talking to for the last couple of years. And what have those IRGC units brought with them, which is SAM-7 missiles that have the capability of shooting down American passenger planes and so on and so on. So when you look at the immediate threat to the United States, it's not just that this conflict with Israel is about something that's happening on the other side of the world. Iran has people within the borders of the United States of America. Iran has terrorist proxies all over the world, and Iran's intercontinental ballistic missile capability is very close to reaching the eastern seaboard of the United States. So those are factors that need to be considered when you try to evaluate where you stand on this and whether or not you can believe your leaders. One of the issues here that I think is not helping President Trump very much is the fact that he doesn't have a real national security advisor. Ever since he got rid of Mike Waltz, he's had Marco Rubio fulfilling both roles, and that obviously is not working out because he doesn't have a real national security advisor with a real communication strategy who is communicating to the people of this country why this isn't just a simple case of believe that Iran is trying to get a nuclear bomb, or don't believe Iran is trying to get a nuclear bomb. And, Eric, I want to give you a chance to weigh in there. There's a lot more that I can say on this, but,
what I would like to ask, and you and I come from a very similar place, I believe. If we don't have to get involved in any foreign wars, the country's going to be better off. I hate sending our young folks into foreign wars that, frankly, are helping people who hate us anyway. Here's the question, though. In order to do what you just said, make the world safer for everyone, don't you need regime change? Don't you need to replace the mullahs and the clerics, get rid of them, and bringing a new, I would call it almost a democracy type government in there? And that they're not going to go down without swinging, these mullahs. They want to retain power. So how do you do it?
Well, anyone who's been to war, and as you know, I spent many, many years on battlefields from Africa all the way to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I would agree with you. If you can avoid a war, then you absolutely want to do that. No doubt about it. One of the things that makes me really upset is knowing now that we never used more than 10% of our advanced military capability on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan. So when I was, 4.5 months pregnant, walking through minefields in Helmand Province, and seeing Marines and U.S. soldiers getting hurt on the battlefield, most of the time that didn't need to happen. The United States could have ended those wars in a very different way very quickly, and we didn't do that. So I'm with you. Anyone who's dragging out a war and who's sending people to die for no reason, and the longer these wars drag on, the more civilians get killed. So none of that needs to happen. However, at the same time, the idea that, well, you can just abdicate, and do nothing. Do nothing or use diplomacy, and that's going to work. I mean, look at what the Obama administration did. They used diplomacy, right, and sent hundreds of millions of dollars to Iran, which they used to further their terrorist agenda and their political agenda worldwide. So that is in part what led us to the current situation. So that is a major issue. And then, of course, there's the fact that the Iranian people have been tortured and murdered and oppressed by this regime for decades, okay? And their voice has been smothered. And I've been talking to members of the Iranian opposition for many, many years now. I used to go and meet with them in Diyala province, north of Baghdad, or meet with some of the people who are allowed out in Baghdad itself when I was living in Iraq for 5 years. And I have followed what has happened to them. And over again, every time the opposition, every time the people have risen up, the regime has come in and absolutely slaughtered anyone standing in their way. Let's not forget that, young girls, young boys, if they speak out in public, they disappear and you have no rights, and their families often just get the body back. Or Iran executes people in like staggering numbers, every single year, and nobody says a word. So I agree with you that if you really want if the mullahs in Iran, this regime is never, ever, ever going to just step aside or step down because their people rise up in a political capacity and put pressure on them. And, the regime says, okay, we're going to give up power. They're not going to give up power, and they're not going to give up without a fight.
Lara, let me, if I may just jump in real quick, about 2 minutes left on this. And
Okay.
There's a divide within the right, within MAGA. Some say go, do what it takes. Trump, press the button, go, whatever. Actually calling for some things that I'm shocked to even say, possibly even nuclear, bunker busters, et cetera. Others are saying don't do it. You start something, this could be the beginning of World War III. MAGA is split on this. What is your message to the folks who all want the same thing, a safer country, a safer globe?
Well, war is messy and it's brutal, and too often, too many innocent people die. However, this idea that if you want peace through strength, well, strength has to be real. People have to know that you mean what it is you're going to say. And look how the United States has already benefited from this. Hamas has been decimated by Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon, another Iranian terrorist proxy, has been decimated by Israel. And all of this has happened without the United States having to put a single soldier forward on the front line of battle. So that strategic relationship, Israel takes a lot of the heat, and they take, a pounding. And what really bothers me, Eric, is the rise that I see of this anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish rhetoric. Every state has good and bad within it. The United States, if you're dealing with the Biden regime, you're dealing with one set of Americans. You deal with the Trump regime, you've got a completely different set. Okay, so one is a globalist regime and the other is not.
I have to ask you, you by definition said you have friends and sources and have been contacting the resistance in Iran, the people who are pushing back on the mullahs and the clerics. This money that Barack Obama sent, $150 billion in his term, and more recently, the $6 billion that Biden sent a couple of months before October 7th, by the way, what did the folks who are trying to be the resistance, what do they say to America and to you when they hear things like that?
They're desperate for help. They're desperate for the United States and the world to pay attention to what they've been trying to do for decades. I have seen a book that the Iranian opposition has made with it's listing the names of people that have been murdered by the regime over the last few decades. Many of the young people on the streets of Iran today, if you're wondering why they're risking their lives like this, it's because their mother or father or grandparents were among those who've been murdered by this regime. And I'm not just talking about now. I'm talking about every time they have risen up, every time they have seemed close to toppling the regime, the world has looked the other way as Iran has gone door to door, street by street, just absolutely obliterating anyone that stands in their path. And so these people are desperate for help. They're desperate for the world to listen to them. I mean, there's many Iranians in the diaspora who talk about why they had to flee their country. And I'm not glossing over the role of the United States and what led to that and the history there. But the reality is that these people know if there is not some kind of external force or external pressure on the regime, that they're just going to be murdered because nobody cares when they are.
External, you mean beyond Israel, which would kind of put us right in the. We're next behind them, I guess. Quick.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be beyond Israel. Maybe Israel's enough. And maybe, I don't know. I don't have hard facts on this, but, Israel takes a lot of the blame. And there's a lot of people supporting Israel. For example, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, right? There's not just the United States
right.
that wants to see regime change in Iran.
Right.
And,
But
I'm not
we happen to be the ones who are supplying all the arms and the assets and likely the intelligence that keeps those folks safe within their own backyards. Lara, you got to go. I really
you can bet that the Islamic countries are providing Israel with intelligence too. You can absolutely bet that it's not just the United States.
Good. I'm waiting for some of these, generals in Iran to be popping up in Israel somewhere with a nice little setup, and hopefully they were turning over their intel of what they knew. So, Lara, we got to go. I love having you on. Love to get you back again real soon. Good friend of mine, Lara Logan, everyone. It's called Going Rogue with Lara Logan. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Take care.
All righty. She's great. One of the best journalists ever. Hey, we got some voicemails at the end of the show. Stick around. You guys tell me exactly what you think of me, the show, and what's going on in the world. Be right back. What a great show. I love this show. I have my good friend Lara Logan, and then followed up with another one of my very, very good friends. My ex was appointed by President Trump as a senior advisor to the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Always happy to bring back Kari Lake. We love our Kari Lake. Kari, really good to have you. So now you tell us you found some waste, fraud, and abuse at U.S. AGM. Tell us about that, please.
Well, you don't have to walk far in Washington, D.C. I mean, you can close your eyes and bump into waste, fraud, and abuse. It's around every corner, in every building, in every agency. I happen to be overseeing one of the most corrupt agencies. It's a small agency that many people have never heard of, U.S. Agency for Global Media. They have maybe heard of some of its outlets, Office of Cuba Broadcasting, Voice of America, and they've got grantees, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, Middle East Broadcasting Network, OTF. Lots of different areas where American taxpayer dollars are flowing in and we're not getting something worthwhile out, or it's flowing into the pockets of people who shouldn't be taking that money. And so we've been uncovering a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, but more importantly, we've been here effectuating President Trump's March 14th executive order to shrink down the bureaucracy of the federal government. And one of the agencies, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, the one that I oversee, he asked in that executive order for us to shrink it down to its minimum size allowable by law. It's called the statutory minimum. And I have been working diligently to make that happen since March 14, even though we've had numerous lawsuits lodged against us. We're still working hard. And today we announced massive terminations of the workforce. I am happy to report that we have successfully cut the workforce by 85% in this agency today, issuing RIF notices, as they're called, reduction in force notices, to roughly about 640 folks. And earlier we had announced, terminations of many other folks who work at this agency. And I'll be honest, there's some really good people who work at this agency. Unfortunately, the agency's been run in such a corrupt manner that it's made it impossible to salvage the agency. And that's why President Trump wants this agency to be deleted. I think there's a way to take some of the assets that are strong and good and find a new home for them. But as it is right now, this is rotten to the core, and it cannot be salvaged in its current form.
It's fascinating, and I'm not sure everyone really understands the role of the whole the umbrella company, but also the group or the Voice of America. Like it's really intended to promote capitalism and democracy around the world. I would almost call it quasi-propaganda, but so what? There's so much negative propaganda coming up to us. And the point I'm trying to make is you walked in there and there was massively staffed with liberals where their voice was representing America from a very, very liberal perspective, right?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned what the focus of this agency is. It is to tell America's story abroad, to the world. And as I said, the American taxpayers pay for this. And so the product that should be going out to the world should be talking about the amazing, amazing country that we live in. And it should be aligned with what our foreign policy is. But in many cases, it hasn't done that over the years. As a matter of fact, there's instances where we've put out anti-American programming, where we put out programming that has bolstered our adversaries, where we've believe it or not, hired people who are foreign asset spies. It's really
so can we stop
what's
there?
happened over the years.
You came in, and not only do they lean severely left at the time, they're actually foreign assets that were being paid by American taxpayers to put out anti-American propaganda with our own radio waves.
Yeah, very, very shoddy history of doing background checks on the people that have been hired. And in many cases, they have created a national security risk for our entire country. I plan to go into great detail about this on Wednesday when I appear before the House Foreign Affairs Committee to talk about the spies, the lies, the mismanagement of this agency. It's shocking the risk they have put our country in by their background checks that, even though they were warned, they weren't doing them properly. They weren't vetting people properly. Now, this agency hires an exorbitant number of foreign nationals from countries that are hostile toward America. So it's really imperative that background checks are done in accordance with the law and in accordance with what law enforcement and intelligence says we need to do. And that wasn't done for a decade or more at this agency, opening us up to potentially hundreds or more spies coming into our country. And I'm going to go into that on Wednesday morning when I appear before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. This agency is rotten. It's a tangled mess. And to be honest, there's no way to salvage it in its current form. And I think that's why President Trump understood that and asked for us to bring it down to its statutory minimum. Whatever the applicable law requires, we boil it down to that. And then let's work to find if there is something salvageable, find a home for that.
Restaff this thing, Kari. I mean, it's so important to get the right tone, the right voice on the Voice of America and the various other entities, the way you push out the American dream and ideals to the rest of the world, make democracy, front and center on all of it. We need that. But that voice is very, very powerful. Those people listen to that. Yeah, go ahead. Final thought, if you don't mind.
I should clarify something, though. President Trump initially had wanted me to be the director of Voice of America. And we learned that this agency had been Trump-proofed. I mean, they made it impossible for me to get into that position where I could go in and try to turn Voice of America around. That's a job that you do have control editorially over what's being put out. Unfortunately, it would take 7 people being confirmed by the Senate for me to get into that role. And so the administration instead made me the senior advisor. So in my role as senior advisor, I don't have a say over what they put out editorially. But here's something really sad. Very few people do. This is an agency that thinks they're independent, that thinks they can run on their programming anything they want. So if they put something out that's anti-American, if they put something out that supports a dangerous regime, there's nothing that I can do. I can't pick up the phone and tell them don't do that, or they can sue me for firewall infringement. This is how backwards the agency is. Even if they put something out that was damaging to our foreign policy, Secretary Rubio couldn't pick up the phone and call Voice of America and say, please knock it off, you're hurting us.
That's crazy.
That's how backwards this agency is.
Imagine, I mean,
that's
you
why
literally
it's rotten,
have
that's why it needs to be reworked.
On broadcast media, and cable, not necessarily digital, but on cable, you literally have to be careful of every word that comes out of your mouth, because the various bodies that listen to everything that's being said on our airways may come down and fine you or bounce you off TV. But we could actually have a liberal propagandist putting out negative stuff about America, and there's nothing that the Secretary of State could do about it. This is crazy.
Yeah, and they have a firewall protection where they could sue anybody who tries to say, hey, don't do that. I mean, they could go full on, totally rogue, anti-American, and it would be next to impossible for me, the president, anybody, a congressman, a senator.
When bad people take
them.
over countries and they just go in, number one, they take over the military. And then the next thing they do, they get to the media. They get right to those towers that are putting out the various propaganda and the points of view. So very, very important. Kari, love to get you back very, very soon. Thank you for saving American taxpayers a heck of a lot of money. Thank you, Kari Lake.
That's right. They're spending a lot of money on this agency. Thank you, Eric.
All right, folks, we'll be back in 2.5 minutes. All right, folks, let's bring in our border reporter correspondent who's been following two big stories in Tijuana, Mexico. Happy to have Oscar El Blue Ramirez back with us. Oscar, you've been a very, very busy man. In Tijuana, tunnel has been found American authorities. I've been in these tunnels, Oscars. There's so many of these tunnels. It's just fascinating how they trick these things out, sometimes with lights. They have to have fans to make sure they get oxygen through them. Tell us the story of what you found. And I think we're going to roll some of the stuff some of the video that you took in pictures. Go ahead.
Yeah, this tunnel, Eric, thank you for the invitation. And before we go on, Baja California, it is the state with more tunnels in the country that, underneath the wall to cross illegally to the United States of America, illegal substances, and narcotics. But this tunnel was found just a couple of days ago, more than 700 meters underneath. But it was discovered. The curious thing about it, and is the most important thing, Eric, it was discovered first by the American authorities in a warehouse outside, crossing the border underneath the wall in Otay Mesa and in the United States territory. Then the American authorities alarmed the Mexican authorities to go particularly to this particular address. And then it was discovered it was a two-story home that they had this narco tunnel that basically goes underneath the wall and crosses and goes directly into a warehouse in the United States of America. This will be number 18, tunnel number 18 in the state of Baja that has been discovered by Mexican authorities, also, cooperating with American authorities. Eric.
It's interesting. And again, I spent some time at the border, and that was, it's not even that far. All right, so these tunnels, here's the border wall. Here's the border wall. It just goes, east-west. These tunnels sometimes they start maybe 100 yards into Mexico and end in a warehouse, maybe only another 100 or 200 yards in the American side of the border, and they're very well hidden. And they're usually around areas where there's a lot of commerce, so you don't see a lot of things coming and going specifically. Is that what you found here as well, Oscar?
Yes, and this one was really close to the pedestrian crossing to the United States of America and the Otay Mesa vehicle port of entry, the Sentry line. So it's just incredible how the cartel has the ability and the freedom to make these tunnels into these houses. Also, not too long ago, around a year ago, another tunnel was discovered next to the National Guard headquarters, also close to Otay Mesa. So it tells you the level of capacity and the level of power that the cartel has due to the corruption, Eric, we have to say it, and the Mexican authorities.
Oscar, tell us about this guy, this bad guy, this drug lord, Edwin Huerta Nuño. He's called El Flaquito, the leader of the cartel. Tell us about what happened this week.
Got captured. Yesterday, got captured was big news, national news in our country of Mexico. Better known, El Flaquito has been operating, and he has been the leader of the Cartel Arellano Felix, a well-known cartel in the state of Baja, extremely violent individual. Really violent individual. A lot of the fentanyl crossings through this particular area, they're directed to his operation. This is his home that it was discovered. Immediately it was raided, and immediately he was stopped and detained. And now he is in detention over there in the city of Mexico. They transported him in the military air force that is called Hercules. Right now there's speculation, it is strong, Eric, that they're waiting for American authorities to see if they're going to extradite him into the United States of America. They're most likely the United States government is going to ask the Mexican government to extradite him into American territory.
And that's because what happened with El Chapo, if he's incarcerated in Mexico, they tend to get out.
Yeah, the majority. And yes, and because of the level of trafficking that, a lot of the people have pointed it upon, he has been in charge of the enormous quantities of fentanyl, also enormous quantities of cocaine, and also a lot of murders that they have been happening, dismembered bodies. A lot of this activity, it is directed to his activity. One of the curious things, Eric, that neighbors were saying, it is that this particular house was guarded and safeguarded by government officials of Mexico. So it tells you the level of corruption, that he was well protected by corrupt officials in Mexico, which they were the ones that they were protecting this drug lord.
Oscar, final thought. Trump administration came out and said there were exactly 0 illegals allowed to stay in the United States. 0 in the month of May. This year, last year, 61,000 that were allowed to stay. Is the U.S. military assisting? And if not, do we need them to assist if they're literally clamping down, closing the border?
Yes, absolutely. Closing down CBP 1, also Border Patrol agents where there were open border gaps, and now they force the Mexican government to put the National Guard over these open border gaps, also hurting the cartel in their pockets because drug trafficking and also human trafficking was at an all-time high. Child trafficking was an all-time high. Exploitation of people through this particular area. Now it has cracked down, and that has pivoted the cartel to this level of violence. Yes, absolutely. Trump policies work, and it is showing right now. It has decreased, almost to 100% of the enormous trafficking rings that they were operating on the other side of the border. Eric.
Crazy. Oscar, really stay safe, my friend. You told me you're headed to Israel possibly in the next couple of weeks or so. You put yourself in harm's way, my friend, for our audience, but you bring great information for us. Thank you, Oscar El Blue Ramirez. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Hey, before we head to break, just want to remind you about the podcast YouTube page, both updated daily. You can hear the show, tons of the content, anywhere, anyway. Be sure to subscribe right now. Don't miss out. Call my voicemail line, too. Tell me what you think of the president. Tell me what you think of what we're doing here. We're going to play some of yours in the next segment. You might end up on TV. We'll be right back. Good news, an appeals court just handed President Trump a major win over pretty boy Gavin Newsom. President Trump is allowed to keep control of all National Guard troops deployed in Los Angeles, and the monsters on MSNBC, well, they just can't believe it.
This decision, in essence, gives Trump the green light to use the National Guard in other states. And the administration has been hinting very publicly that they're going to go into New York City, Chicago, maybe some other states, all happen to be blue. What is the mood like, Elizabeth, that you sense from talking to lawmakers, state officials, about where this goes from here now that the president does have the legal green light to use the National Guard?
I can tell you that in New York City, if he deploys the National Guard in New York, it'll cause it's going to cause a giant outrage and create probably more violence than there would be anyway.
Isn't that what he wants?
Well, that's of course one of the working theories, that he wants to, create this all over the country, and then
So a little correction to I guess it was the host, Sam Stein, who I think he runs Daily Beast also, or one of those liberal publications. No, the common denominator is not necessarily that all those cities were blue. It's that all those cities were sanctuary cities who decided to go against federal law and protect illegals, which Trump said was going to be illegal. And by the way, he got that. The judge just said, we'll handle it. You won't handle it, Newsom. You won't handle it, Brandon Johnson in Chicago, or Eric, whatever the hell your name is, in New York. Trump will do it. Feds will do it. Jazzy Jasmine Crockett, couldn't go a week, right? Jazzy Jasmine Crockett thinks that Trump supporters are sick, and she's not afraid to say it to anyone. Here's America's dumbest and least filtered congresswoman running her mouth about Republicans yet again.
This idea that we don't care how many people get hurt, we don't care how we prostitute our service members, thinking that you have your own special little army that's for you. I mean, it is sick. It is really sick. And anybody that supports it is also sick. And so, we've got a mental health crisis in this country, because everyone, no matter how you affiliate yourself, should be against Trump, period. This is not partisan for me. Like, I would give anything to have, it's sad to say, George Bush. Give me any regular Republican nowadays.
I can't take it anymore. I can't. My ears started to bleed. Jazzy Jasmine Crockett was talking such garbage. No. We're not sick because we disagree with you. We're Americans. We have the right to agree or disagree with anyone. We have a First Amendment right to say it. And by the way, we don't agree with wide open borders, increased crime in our cities, protecting illegals who come over, break the law, and really kind of blaming the people who are the victims of these people. You can't blame them and shame them. You're wrong. We're not sick because we have a different. By the way, we're about 65% of the country right now who agree with what Donald Trump is doing on immigration. Keep going, Jazzy Jasmine. Keep digging. As they say, person digging their own grave, let them keep digging. Caroline Leavitt responded. By the way, that was a metaphor for her political career, not her life. Anyway, Caroline Leavitt responded to Crockett's latest attacks. Listen to what Caroline Leavitt had to say.
Here on our homeland as well.
Thank you. And then really quick on Jasmine Crockett, she said, I believe, that
Trump supporters are mentally ill before calling for bipartisan support against the president. Can you respond to that, especially considering she's a rising star in the Democrat Party right now?
She is a rising star. It's quite something to behold, actually. I hope that she continues to be a rising star for the Republican Party, at least. I think it's incredibly derogatory to accuse nearly 80 million Americans of mental illness.
I agree wholeheartedly. Caroline Levitt said, you know what, let her be the rising star of the party. She's speaking for literally like 15% of the country. Crockett's stupidity knew no bounds yesterday. She continues to do race bait virtually every time someone gives her a platform, and still she thinks that Kamala Harris was the right choice for America this past November. Listen to this.
Because when you think about it, Kamala Harris, light years ahead of Donald Trump as it relates to qualifications, as it relates to her overall resume, and as it relates to the fact that she was a lot younger. Everybody said that they wanted to get rid of Joe Biden because he was too old. Then you had a younger, qualified, non-felon candidate, and somehow the people still chose the old white man. So, like, for me, I don't think it was ever about that.
Nothing to do with the race, Jazz. You got to understand this. You guys are playing the race card. It didn't work. You guys got smoked on this. It had nothing to do, electing Donald Trump had nothing to do with him being white or old. It had everything to do with Joe Biden being completely demented. He lost his complete mind during his presidency. And the only logical replacement at the time, because they let him run, they should have bounced him before that, was Kamala Harris. The minute she couldn't answer the question, how are you going to combat or try and bring inflation down, everyone realized she had nothing here. It was an airball here. And all of a sudden the world, and especially the liberal left, said, wait a minute, we're going to back her for president? This is going to be worse than the Biden 4 years. And that's why it had nothing to do with anyone's race, Jazzy Jasmine, but keep playing the race card. Keep playing the race card. Didn't work in 24, ain't going to work in 26 or 28. Barack Obama, pushing for more censorship on the internet. Actually, he's calling for governments to step in and, censor us on social media. Listen to this really scary suggestion.
But part of what we're going to have to do is to start experimenting with new forms of journalism and how do we use social media in ways that reaffirm facts, separate facts from opinion. We want diversity of opinion. We don't want diversity of fact. By the way, it will require some government, I believe, regulatory constraints around some of these business models.
So they're back to this. You remember Biden and Kamala Harris tried to have a disinformation board where it's going to be all liberals on this board, and decided what was real information, real news, real information, and what was fake. And they were going to decide, and the people who were caught putting out fake news were, going to get censored, canceled, imprisoned. Obama's calling for the same thing. Let me guess, you're going to want your liberal friends on that board who decides what's right and what's wrong, right? Barack. Hakeem Jeffries still letting Trump's spending bill keep him up at night. He refuses to move on and still thinks there's something he can do to stop it. He is so vastly wrong.
And the proposed cuts to Medicaid, the largest cuts being proposed to Medicaid in American history, are unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American, and together we're going to do everything we can to stop
All right,
them.
I want to do one more. Hakeem's nut. I want to do one more. James Carville, mind you, this guy was one of the smartest political minds in the business. He got Bill Clinton elected. He came up with the slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." It got Bill Clinton elected. Watch what I think James Carville is really I think he's lost his mind too. Watch.
And don't worry about having a panel discussion about the Democrats. What are they going to do? Look at what's right in front of you. What's right in front of you. And I think there is sufficient reason to marshal resources and together to see what the hell's going on here, which may be even caused by underlying, what do you call it, syphilitic? I don't know what the medical word for it is. In other words, he may have the clot. And I think this is, as with because, and we had the No Kings, which is the largest thing. And, maybe we should have no syphilis rallies.
Well, James Carville, I think it's time you hang up the cleats, my friend. All right, before we head to break, take a look at this new episode of a show I do. It's called On the Ground. It's only on X. It's only on Twitter. It's a phenomenal show. I would just love you to go to my Twitter account to find it. But here's a little taste of it. Watch. On the ground, no kings. Across America, the streets are filling. Anger, noise, flags, fury, fire. And we were there on the ground in New York and Washington, D.C., and across the nation, a divide widens. First came the anti-Trump crowds, marching, chanting, demanding accountability. Then came the Trump loyalists, fighting back with fire and fury of their own. Two sides, one country, no middle ground left to speak of. No hosts, no spin, no filters, just the raw sound of a nation tearing at the seams. This is No Kings. This is On the Ground. All right, it's my favorite time of the show, right? Okay, so I'm smiling because I know Bannon's coming up. He's coming on right now. So let me set this up. Yesterday, I coming to work and I'm listening to Fox on the radio, and I hear John Roberts interviewing Trey Gowdy, and Trey Gowdy was saying some really nasty stuff about Steve and Tucker and us on the MAGA right. And I got to where like get Steve in the seat.
Hang on a second. Hang on. I'm trying to cure you of all this. This is why we got you here at RAV. You're coming into Fox. You're coming into Fox. It's just so hard. Okay. It's like a girlfriend, dude. She's not that into you. Okay. Why do you keep listening? Bolling, what are you doing to me? You're my rock, dude. You're the pirate. What's the pirate?
I got to know what the opposition is saying.
And you're daydreaming. You're daydreaming. Hey,
you are going to love this.
I could be something for. I can sub for Bill. I can sub for Bill O'Reilly.
Just listen to this. You're not going to believe it. So I was hoping Bannon was going to come on yesterday. He was too busy with his other friends, not this friend. Even though the toss is go on the Getter and the Rumble chat. The toss is their favorite part. Too busy with his other boyfriends, and so I played it anyway. And I had a little thing to say about it. And then what happens after is really amazing. So go ahead, Mad Dog. All right, very quickly, I got to get to this. I was listening to Fox, and it pissed me off beyond belief. This guy, Trey Gowdy, don't like him. And he took a shot at our friend Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, but Steve Bannon, listen.
He is MAGA. He is America first. So when you are that, you get to define what that means. And again, I keep coming back to the point that there are several critics, too. One used to be on television, I think. The other used to be in prison, I think. Those are the two main critics. Together, they have received 0 electoral votes for president. Neither one of them has the guts to run. So either run for president to be the commander-in-chief or critique in private, or better yet, shut up.
And just to answer your question on why don't they critique him in private, I would posit that then they'll miss all that attention on social media for doing it publicly.
No, you're so cynical, John. When'd you get so cynical?
Hey, Trey Gowdy, Steve Bannon has more guts in his little finger than you got in your body. And Tucker Carlson, love him or hate him, doesn't matter. He's done more. He's accomplished more than you ever will. Trey, time for you.
Hold it. I got to give a Trey Gowdy story.
Before you weigh in on that, I just want to tell you what happened. So I put that up on Twitter and social media everywhere. Yep. And I get this email right here into my inbox from John Roberts, the host. He's like, tell me what I said that wasn't true. Go ahead, Mad Dog, the next one. So I text him, I email him back. And I say, hey, John, if you listen to my comment, it called you out for piling on Tucker and Bannon after Trey Gowdy delivered a few low blow and unfunny insults. I guess I expected more from you, John. You look like a couple of high school mean girls. There's tens of millions of followers, including the President of the United States, who are sick and tired of legacy media types trashing our MAGA voices. Best ETB. And then he comes back with this one. This is one you're going to love. Who are you calling legacy media? You and I used to be friends. I certainly didn't abandon those sentiments. And if Bannon, Tucker, et al. Really wanted to deliver a message to POTUS about their concerns, they would do it in private. But publicity is really their coin of the realm. You can't monetize a private meeting. And I think the irony of that is that where were you yesterday?
Yeah, I spent John Roberts. John, this is what a clown you are. With all the years you spent, you're still doing afternoon television for Fox. Look, John Roberts, as was reported yesterday, I was at the White House for 3 hours, just as a reporter, 3 hours. Tucker and I do critique this with the president at a time and place of our choosing when it works for the president. Okay, something more than you do, sir, because you're just a news reader. And this is about John Roberts. As I've recommended, they ought to have a full FARA investigation into the network that you draw a dollar from. Because anybody that took first off, are you working for a foreign government or not? Is your network working for a foreign government? And John Roberts, let me be specific. You took paychecks from Murdoch in 21. So don't sit there and tell me how MAGA you are. Anybody took paychecks from in 21. We know exactly how they tried to bury Trump, and I would say 22 also. For Trey Gowdy, I'll give you an anecdote about Trey Gowdy. I'm sitting there getting crucified by Shifty Shift and in Swalwell in the House Intelligence Committee, I don't know, for 25 or 30 hours. And I have two of the best lawyers in the country, Bill Burke, who is now on the board at Fox News, and Alex Spiro, who's famous for being also Elon Musk's lawyer. He's also my lawyer. Being grilled, and the Speaker of the House that, punched out on Trump had made Devin Nunes give up because we controlled we were the majority. We controlled the House Intelligence Committee, made him step down, and Trey Gowdy took over. And my two lawyers said Trey Gowdy was worse going after Trump.
Yeah.
Right? And the Russia thing in the skiff, then Shifty Shift and thing. Trey Gowdy's never answered the question, Trey, why did you drop out of Congress so quickly? Why did you drop out of Congress so quickly? You didn't get a federal judgeship. You didn't go to a white shoe law firm. Curious minds want to know. I know what the rumors say, but people like to know why you dropped out of Congress so quickly. Say? I don't know. I can't. I don't want to go there.
But I will tell you, Trey,
I don't want traffic. I don't want traffic in those types of sordid tales.
That's right. Trey Gowdy's a guy who also said he believed James Comey. He believed that Trump was not spied upon in the 2016 campaign. 100%. And in hindsight, we know he was, and they were, and you guys were being spied. By the way,
he tried to crucify all the Trump people behind closed doors in the skiff. He's a gutless coward. He reminds me of a hand grenade with a bad haircut, right? So Trey Gowdy, this one's for you. Just go ahead and say our name, right? By the way, I went to prison to defend the Constitution, brother, and for President Trump.
You did.
Okay,
you did.
But rats like you and Roberts, you're a clown. Why don't they talk to the president privately?
Steve, I hated when Gowdy's going. One of them used to be on TV. I think what a douchey thing to say. I hate to say that word, but what a horrible thing to say. And then to you, went to prison. I think. And Roberts was like, ha ha ha. And then with that they're going after clicks. I mean, it's just disgusting. It was gross, Steve.
We're going to the clicks are an added benefit. But no, we're fighting for principle, John Roberts. You guys and Trey Gowdy, you work for a network that, quite frankly, has been like an agent for a foreign government. The cheerleading is outrageous. What you've done is outrageous. The danger you put this country in is outrageous. Thank God we've stopped it to date, and we're going to continue to fight it and stop it. We're going to start with a cold open about the president of Tarmac. Brother, thank you so much. Great turnover. You're saying the gutter and the Rumble chat like this is the best part of the show. The turnover.
Love it. When you're not here, they're like, "Where's the Bannon banter?" They call it the Bannon banter. I didn't make that up. That's it. Good to have. Hey, have a great weekend,
brother.
Steve. Tell the president I said hi.
Eric, have a great weekend.
Have lunch with him.
I'm looking forward to the show, man. Thank you, sir.